everybody, welcome back for a brand new video. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing Jewelry Bonney. So, I'm not going to be doing any real discussions on any of the Straw Hats, particularly not Nami. However, for anyone who's actually seen my last videos and stuff like that, particularly the one where I did the Straw Hats bounties prediction after Wano, not Wano, but Egghead, getting my arcs a little confused there, and one where I also did a sequel to that, the Nami's video. I might do a little bit of a follow-up to the Nami one because I realized that there were some pretty important things I forgot to actually mention in that video. And matter of fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if there are some people out there who actually realized that, there were some pretty heavy things that that you probably forgot to mention in that video that could have been really important to discuss in that. So I might be doing a little bit of follow-up to the Nami one because I want to go over some more things that I discovered on her on the bounty prediction that I was sort of going over that in the video. So but I'll get to that when the time comes to it. But for the sake of this video, this is going to be a Jewelry Bonney video, okay? Alright. So Jewelry Bonney is one of the worst generations, along with Luffy, Zoro, Kid, Law, and all them and stuff like that. Okay, she's basically one of the supernovas, and Jewelry Bonney is currently the only female of the supernovas like that. But this isn't really about the supernovas entirely and stuff like that. It's going over Bonney herself. Okay, so right now in the Egghead arc, basically to set up the Egghead arc, it's basically the arc where we're getting introduced to Bonnie's Bonnie's story, Bonnie's back character. We're getting a little more about her and stuff like that. So this is basically Bonnie's, well, it's not really, I wouldn't really consider it Bonnie's arc in total. She's sort of sharing the arc along with Vegapunk and stuff like that, but it's basically, right now in the current storyline, everything that's practically going on in the current events of the manga is basically Bonnie's story, right? Bonnie is basically the main character right now. And the Straw Hats, see, that's how it is with, the Straw Hats and how Oda does the stories like that, is that each time when the Straw Hats go to, while the Straw Hats are the main characters and the main, the main stars of the One Piece manga series, every time when they go to a Pacific island, the island basically shifts the idea of the focus from the Straw Hats to basically set up the characters on that island to be the main characters, while the Straw Hats are more of more like the very supportive cast. They're the very they basically become from main characters supporting characters, but in a way they're the ones who are still still being the stars of the manga and like that. They're basically still leading the manga, right? It was no more different in Wano and like that, because even though the Straw Hats are the main characters in the manga, the entire Wano arc was about the citizens of Wano, Momo, the Nine Scabbards and all that. It's like that. It was basically their story being told, and the Straw Hats were basically just there to be supportive of it, right? And they're basically doing the same thing here. So right now in the current events of the story, we're getting a little more about Bonnie's past, all right? So for instance, we basically discover how Bonney actually came to be born, right? And it's very devastating, sad when you realize what actually occurred. And Bonney never actually knew this. She basically found out when she basically decided, because all right, so to put it to basically rewind the clock back, when we first meet Bonney and say that when we ride to Egghead Island, Bonney reveals that she's been trying to locate Vegapunk in order to make him pay for what he did to her father. Unfortunately, Bonney does not understand the full details of what actually occurred and what actually happened to her father. So right now, in the current, basically set up in the story, Kuma, the cyborg, who basically helped the Straw Hats escape from Sabaody Arpaculo, and the same one who helped guard the Sunny of the ship for nearly 2 years while they were gone, is basically Bonnie's father, right? And Bonney is very upset, very upset and angry at Vegapunk for turning her father into a mindless cyborg or with no emotions or memories of anything in the world. However, Bonney does not understand the full details of what actually occurred, and throughout the events of the story, and a bit of a spoiler here, or in case you were not caught up with the Egghead arc, I would probably recommend you basically turning off the videos like that, because this is really going to be a spoiler video like that. I should have mentioned at the beginning, but just in case, you might want to just stop it right here, okay? But let's actually get on the video if you're okay with spoilers, or if you've actually caught up with everything, okay? So Bonney basically finds out some interesting things when she basically goes into her father's memory bubbles like that. She basically learns how she was born. She basically learns who her mother is. She basically learns the struggles and the hardships that her father had to go through growing up and like that. And she basically, after she endures all that and how it came to be inside that she basically comes to the realization that Vegapunk is not the one responsible for what happened to her father, but instead is Saint Saturn. Right now, Saint Saturn is one of the current members of the Gorosei, who is currently in AK Island. Right, he's the one with the well, we don't actually know what his Delphoid is. We can assume that it's some type of model of like an Ushi-Oni type Delphoid, things like that, like an Ushi-Oni type model. However, Oda might do a bit of a twist on it on what Saturn's actual Delphoid might be. It might be something else entirely, but we won't actually know until it actually gets revealed. But for the sake of the video, let's just continue on talking about Bonney. Right now, going over Bonney necessarily, her backstory is really, really devastating like that. And I've even read some comments and other things out there having other people say that basically Kuma's backstory is basically the most devastating of all, and it is truly devastating. It's like that. Kuma himself, like Bonnie's father, Kuma, who is actually Bonnie's adopted father, right? We actually find out that Bonney, so Bonnie's mother was basically kidnapped by a member of the Celestial Dragons, right? She was kidnapped by the Celestial Dragons, and we don't actually know who was the one who actually kidnapped her, and we don't actually know. And basically, we don't actually know who it is that basically ordered it and say that, but we do know that Bonnie's mom, Ginny, basically became the eighth, like the some kind of like eighth of the Holy Lands like that. It's basically how it's sometimes described. But what basically occurs, and it's really something that you really don't want to just say out loud, out in a very bad way. But let's just say Bonnie's mother, Ginny, was taken against her will. And keep in mind, Ginny loved Kuma very much, right? She loved Kuma and has always been trying to get Kuma to marry her and like that. But Ginny is just basically taken against her will to be the bride of like a celestial dragon, and she has to remain there for 2 years. And then during the events of those 2 years, Bonney is basically conceived, okay? And afterwards, after 2 years, Ginny basically catches a disease called the sapphire scales and basically leaves. And before she actually passes away because of the sapphire scales, she basically tells Kuma that she loves him. Unfortunately, Kuma doesn't actually get to hear this because he ends up leaving before she even, well, she gets a chance to say it, but to put it simple, he leaves before he can even hear anything. Right? And when he arrives, Ginny is basically, passed away and dead, but right there is basically Ginny, a little baby girl. And even though Kuma is not the father, it's like that, Ginny basically brought the child to Kuma because Ginny obviously wanted the baby to grow up completely away from, basically wanted the child to grow up that didn't want it to basically be around the Celestial Dragon, right? She obviously knew what she was doing to make this kind of decision. Ginny made the decision to basically bring the baby to Kuma, alright? So going over not Ginny, but Bonney herself, right? After the events of basically occurs like that, and as Bonnie's basically growing up, she basically comes down with the same sapphire scales that basically destroy her mother, right? Kuma basically raises Bonnie like that. Eventually, over time, Kuma does manage to find help in Vegapunk, and he basically manages to help Kuma cure Bonnie like that. However, it doesn't come as a prize because Vegapunk basically wants to. It basically starts when Vegapunk wants to create like this these cyborgs model off Kuma and like that. However, Saturn basically overhears it and decides to step in and make some adjustments to that because not wanting to actually have an enemy be a representative of it. So basically Saturn sets up a bit of a parallel to that. It says like, well, we can't have an enemy be a representative and say that would not work. So basically Kuma has to basically join the warlords or become a warlord of the CE, working for the world government, and then eventually over time, after a good year or two and stuff like that, Kuma basically has to give up his memory and become a mindless cyborg, always obeying the world government's orders no matter what, okay? And eventually Bonney does find out that her father is basically, because during the events of 2 years when Bonney was basically being cured, because Vegapunk told him that Bonney would have to at least rest for at least for a good 2 years, right? Bonney was basically 8 when she basically met Vegapunk, and she wouldn't be cured until she was 10, so a good 2 years at least, okay? And Kuma basically wrote letters to Bonney, but Bonney never received any of those letters, right? She did eventually find out about the letters because of Kuma's memory and like that when she entered the memory bottle, okay? Now, going over it a little bit more, as we basically go over into deeper into it like that, when Bonney basically learns that Saturn is basically the one responsible for the orders of what happened to her father and why did this occur, Bonney is basically really outraged and furious and basically attacks one of the Gorosei with basically no worries at all. Like basically just attacks and just like basically just simply just like literally just trying to kill the Gorosei, all right? Just literally trying to kill him and completely cold blood and stuff like that to make him pay for what Saturn did to her father. All right. So to basically continue on with the video and like that, the main focus of this video is actually going over not really Bonney's past, but I feel like it was important to go over Bonney necessarily what we've learned, okay? So the main focus of this video is actually going to be Bonney's Delphi, right? Bonney's Delphi was revealed to us to be the Toshi no Mi, all right? Now, the events of how she actually got the Delphi is a little bit of, really creeped out and a little, really creeped out when you actually learn about it, right? In most cases with Delphi fruit, you have to actually eat the Delphi fruit. There are other ways to actually get the Delphi ability and like that, but as far as like in terms of like the central point of it for a very narrative point of view, it's just like eat the Delphi, right? However, we find out from Saturn that Saturn is the one responsible for Bonney getting the Delphi ability, right? And to basically sum it up, Saturn basically reveals that they basically did an extra act and out of a Delphi and give it to a child in order to see if they can give the baby a Delphi ability. Like, because babies are basically newborns like that, or basically they're so young they can't actually chew or anything of their own free will. It's like that. So basically what they did is they did an extract of the Delphi and basically inserted it within the baby, right? And eventually over time the Delphi basically eventually Bonney herself managed to unlock the Delphi ability, right? Now, Bonney's had the Delphi ability since she was a baby or a child, but it didn't actually come into effect until she was at least good like around 5 or 6 years old. So quite a little time before she actually managed to use it, right? And when she first utilized it, Bonney basically changed her age from like a little girl to basically a grown woman, all right? And it completely shocked everybody trying to figure out what occurred, and they think that Bonney might have even eaten a Delphi fruit, but none of them even understood like when did Bonney even eat a Delphi fruit, right? Even to us, the audiences, we were completely confused about this. Wait, when did she eat a Delphi fruit? Just 1 minute she was perfectly fine, and then all of a sudden she's an adult. It's like there was like a page missing in that panel. Like everyone was like thinking, did Oda forget to draw a panel? But no, we eventually find out that what actually occurred is that Saturn was basically doing testing. All right, he was basically doing human testing on Bonnie's mom and on Bonney herself. All right. Now, we basically learned the events of what Bonney's Delphi is. It's basically the Toshi no Mi, or the age fruit, right? It basically allows her to manipulate manipulate the age of time, right? Now, it doesn't just focus on time specifically. Well, I mean, it is basically time, but there are other Delphis that actually that basically have their own focus on time as well, all right? Take, for instance, the Toki no Mi, all right? The Toki no Mi basically allows someone to travel into the future, basically 20 years exactly, right? Now, is that the limit for everybody, or is that just the limit for, why am I, Lady Toki, right? How can I forget that? Yeah, her name is actually the name of the Delphi, right? Could travel 20 years in the future, right? And then you also have the slow beam, or basically like the slow fruit, which allows someone to slow down, basically slow someone down, right? They can basically, hypnotize, technically not hypnotize someone, but they can basically hit them with like the slow beam, and they slow down, right? And they can't, and I think the slow time is about 20 to 30 seconds. I think that, I don't remember necessarily off the top of my head. However, Bonnie's Delphi, in terms of that, is a little bit more of a higher upgrade, all right? And there are other things that basically focus on time as well. Not time in the sense of actual time, but more of like the physical sense. So take, for instance, Shinobu's Delphi allows her to basically mature things up, right? So basically, she can take an apple and mature it, right, to the point where it basically becomes rotten and old, right? She was able to do this with with Momo when he was a child, basically age him up and mature him up to where he becomes a full-grown adult. However, there are some pretty big differences between Bonnie's Delphi when she does this to everybody to Shinobu. Shinobu mentioned that when she basically ages up Momo, he will permanently be stuck in that adult form, right? He can't change back to normal. However, Bonnie did mention when she basically turned Vegapunk into a child that her abilities do not affect living things permanently, right? Now, we do see in the manga, of course, that Bonnie can affect non-living things. So she can affect living things and non-living things, but it seems like it might be possible that only non-living things are infected or basically permanently affected, as far as we can tell, right? We never actually seen a non-living thing actually change back to normal, but we do know that Bonnie basically did state that living things are not permanently changed, right? They will basically revert back to normal no matter what, right? And Bonnie has shown that she can age people up or age them down. Now, Bonnie has shown other abilities as well with her Delphi, and that her abilities doesn't just focus on one specific timeline, but it's almost like a complete course of like different timelines that she can choose from like limited possibilities, right? And it's almost like Bonnie is literally tapping into like the multiverse of time itself. And we sort of get this with her distorted future, right? When Bonnie first utilizes the distorted future, she basically gives off like a hulking body like that is basically very resemblance of the Kuma's Kuma's lineage, just like that. She basically got sort of like the Buccaneer kind of body, right? And it's kind of like giving the possibility of like, what if Bonnie was actually born into a Buccaneer, right? So basically, anyone who actually has this Delphi is tapping into sort of like a new timeline or like a new age that basically is basically asking, what if I was born in this time? What if I was born in this age, right? It's kind of like that, right? And Bonnie herself, one person she basically idolizes a lot is Nika, right? Now, in the current events of the story, and a bit of a spoiler here, but I did mention this at the beginning, say that Bonnie has not actually figured out that Luffy is basically Nika, right? And to sum it up, Bonnie basically grew up hearing stories of Nika from her father and like that, because her father herself basically grew up hearing the inspirations of Nika from his father as well, okay? And Bonnie does realize and know that Nika fights with a rubber-like body. So one of her main things that goes on in the events of the story is that Bonnie basically fights. When she does her distorted future, she basically asks for a future like Nika, right? She basically asks us for give me a future like Nika, right? So she's basically asking for a future like Nika, right? And one thing to sum it up, and I've seen other YouTube videos going over this area of going over Bonnie's Delphi specifically on their own opinions, and everyone is sort of describing it as like, it might not necessarily be Bonnie actually becoming Nika herself or becoming like a copy of Nika, but more of just like imitating Nika, right? She basically wants to be like Nika, and that's sort of what her Delphi is basically doing. That it's sort of giving like the possibility of like what if she could be Nika, but she's not Nika entirely, right? And a lot of people basically sum it up is that Bonnie might, the way like Bonnie's actually doing it, it's more like her body is like it's sort of like expanding her arm without necessarily turning it into rubber, right? It's basically like the arm is actually expanding, like you would think it's rubber, but it's not turning into rubber necessarily, right? And that's sort of how some people are basically describing it. It's like it's basically like Bonnie being like rubber, but is not necessarily becoming rubber itself, right? Now, a lot of people basically summarize and basically think of the possibility of like, if Bonnie's able to do distorted future, and we know Bonnie can do other distorted futures on other characters because when basically Bonnie ran into the Straw Hats during the Egghead arc, they basically tried to escape for a while and go into hiding, and she basically turns Luffy, Chopper, and Jinbei into different versions of themselves at different age. So Jinbei becomes a little kid, Chopper and Luffy become grown adults, right? Some old men, okay? And Luffy's basically described as Luffy in another possibility, right? So it does seem possible that Bonnie can affect other people with this distorted future, right? However, I don't know if it's necessarily possible for her to actually affect people in the sense of like like she might be able to affect them in the sort of future, but she might not be able to affect them necessarily in the sense of like, you know, becoming like an actual Nika like zone, right? So her abilities might only focus on the abilities of like manipulating a Nika like future, like, you know, fighting like Nika necessarily, such as like stretching out your arms or basically stretching out your legs. It's probably like all she can necessarily do, right? I don't think, because if that's the case, then one might even argue that her Delphoid might be a zone type, but I don't actually know if her Delphoid is a zone type. It's probably still classified as paramecia type, and that it just basically allows someone to basically have the sort of the idea, the imagination of the possibilities of like, what if, right? It's basically, it is sort of like a what if, right? And that's a big if, right? It's a what if I had the abilities like Nika, right? What if I could fight like Nika, right? What if I could, right? And that's how it's really described, right? And how one might even argue it might be. Now, we still not egghead argument, right? And Oda can do some pretty wacky things from the current events of the manga, right? So we have no idea of knowing what's actually going to occur and what could actually happen next, right? But I mean, right now, and plus the whole idea of like, you know, everyone becoming Nikas, while I'm not necessarily against seeing it because I think it would be damn awesome and cool, I don't know if, to me, that feels like, to me, it feels like it's not really time for that, right? Like, I feel like that would be like the end of the series kind of event. And like, to me, that would feel like a really big thing. That would feel like the end of the series kind of thing, all right? You know, I could be wrong, right? And to be honest, like, if it does get introduced in this story, I'm not in this this current arc, I'm not gonna really complain about it, right? Because I think it would be damn cool and awesome to see, right? So I'm all for it, right? But I just don't know if it's necessarily time for that yet, right? And you see, that's the thing, is like, Bonnie's Delphoid focuses on age itself, right? With Luffy's Delphoid necessarily, basically the Hito no Mi, we know with his awakening he can affect other things and make the other things rubber as well, right? So for Bonnie to have that ability as well to affect other things and become rubber itself, because it would basically summarize, like, you know, it would basically point out a very good question here, is like, well, is Bonnie only able to basically is Bonnie only able to affect other things and make other things as rubber as well, or any other kind of as well? Like, could Bonnie basically ask for a what if time if she had like a Logia ability, or like some other paramecia ability, or even another zone like ability, right? Could she actually ask for these possibilities? And I don't think that's necessarily it. I think because, like, I don't think it's necessarily focused on the Delphoid itself. It's probably focusing on the body itself, right? So basically, Bonnie could be asking for an age of like, what if she had this kind of body, right? What if she actually had that kind of body, right? So maybe it could be possible that the actual Delphoid can't affect other Delphoids, right? So basically, while she can actually ask for a Nika-like future with a body that's sort of like rubber, she can't particularly make herself rubber or other things rubber as well, right? That is solely upon the actual Delphoid itself, the Gomu no Mi, or basically the Hito no Mi model Nika, right? And to me, I would like it very perfectly that way, because, you know, Bonnie's Delphoid is already being set up to be one very powerful thing. And if Oda does lead it to something like that, then it would basically be completely overpowering, to the point as like how powerful are you going to keep making these Delphoids, right? It's like, is there ever going to be a limit to it? But that's you know, that's basically up for you guys to decide, like, what you guys would appeal on. It's like, that would be your guys' opinion overall. So, but overall, in my case of the story itself, I don't necessarily think that Bonnie's Delphoid is. I think Bonnie's Delphoid is a paramecia type. I think she's just basically just having her body manipulate her. Basically, the Delphoid is basically manipulating Bonnie's body to sort of mimic other races, all right? That she's basically just mimicking the possibilities of, like, what if her body could actually stretch like Nika, right? What if she could actually fight like Nika, right? Without the sense of actually becoming rubber like Nika, right? And Bonnie, we don't actually know if Bonnie's ever realized this herself, but as far as we know, as far as we're aware of, we're still currently egghead, so we don't actually know what could actually happen then. So it's just basically left up to chance, and we'll just have to wait to see till we actually get to the end to know for sure what's actually going to occur, okay? But that'll actually do it for this video. Thank you so much for joining me for this Bonnie video. Other people made their own suggestions, ideas, and I think other people are probably got the right idea that Bonnie's stealth fruit is just basically mimicking the possibilities of like what if she could fight like Nika, right? It's just like like Nika, right? Or like just what if I could fight like Nika, right? It's more like a possibility, right? And rather than just being completely accurate, right? So that'll do for the video. Thank you so much for joining me. If you liked the video, had anything to say, please leave a comment down below. Hit the subscribe button, notification bells, all that kind of stuff, and you all have a good day. Bye now.